and welcome to the Gifts of Service interview series. This project is brought to you by the Ontario region of Narcotics Anonymous Fellowship Development Team. In this series, we engage in meaningful conversations with NA members about recovery, service, and the NA program. We've reached out to a wide range of addicts with various amounts of clean time and diverse life experiences, but they all have this in common. They love Narcotics Anonymous and are passionate about carrying our message of hope to the addict who still suffers. In our first episode, I'm joined by Kathryn K from Alberta. Let's dig in. Welcome, Kathryn. Glad you're here.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks. It's nice to be invited, and it's great to talk on a great topic like service.
So I always like to start by asking, how did you first experience the NA message?
Yeah, I started in the other fellowship and eventually found somebody I used to use with on a bus, and they gave me the NA hotline number. So it was that, I actually thought it was a using number, but it was getting off the bus and calling that on a payphone for our younger members, calling the NA hotline. And so I have a real special place in my heart for NA hotlines and just that other addict being there on the other end of the phone. Over time, somebody gave me 2 NA tapes because I was in quite a bit of isolation here in Alberta. So I listened to those 2 members' tapes over and over and over again in my tractor. And so I appreciate the recorded message as well. Shout out to anyone who's listening to this. My heart is with you. And then it just exposed me that NA is big. It wasn't just here in Alberta and here in Edmonton, it was around the world, and that helped me feel really connected. So, and then things like we had the meeting by mail, as you know, everyone's talking about Zoom these days, but we had the loners group, which came in the mail, and then we had a meeting by mail too. And so those were early kind of Zoom, I really think, connecting me to the bigger NA fellowship until Edmonton grew to, that 2 meetings a day kind of thing here in Edmonton. So
can you talk a little bit about the meetings by mail? I've heard that mentioned in passing, but I'm curious to know what was that like? Like, what was it?
Yeah, the initial one was, and the loners group were, just you wrote in to World Services, and then like kind of a letter format, and then they compiled them and printed it out at World Service, and so it came kind of as a stapled together kind of magazine, and then you got to read everyone's letters, and then people began to with permission with World Service, you could exchange addresses and communicate individually if you want. But there was I should dig it out of I'm sure there's a couple versions deep in my closet somewhere.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see those. So meetings by mail and payphone. So how long ago did you get introduced to Narcotics Anonymous?
Yeah, so that the NA hotline was probably in 1991. And then some of that other stuff was in the early 90s. Yeah.
Wow.
And so, if you think about how far we've come. And then, of course, once I got to face-to-face meetings, getting my hands on a basic text, that was absolutely where the message, I was in isolation. So I read, people are like, boy, the literature well. Well, that's all I had was a couple of cassette tapes and the basic text. And so if you're withdrawing and you can't sleep anyway, this is what you read, right? So I still tell people who are new, start with the basic text, read the stories in the back, because you have to identify. To me, that was the big thing. I identified as an addict because you guys said you were addicts, and I heard your stories. And so, and then that whole concept of not feeling alone, right? Feeling understood and not alone. That's a big part of the message in my early days.
Absolutely. Do you still have that first basic text?
I do have the 5th edition was my first copy, and it's falling apart. I'm a big believer that if your basic text is falling apart, you probably are not.
Oh, wow, I love that.
I have a 6th edition because that's where we are now, and I love the new stories, and I'm certainly reading that. But my for my own personal recovery, my go-to is my underlined startup highlighted 5th edition. Mm-hmm.
Right. Wow,
my husband has a 3rd edition, but the dog ate most of that. So.
So what was your first experience being of service in NA?
Yeah, I mean, this is a funny question because, it's not like I was living in my car and I was, I was supposed to be going to school, but I had used up I was using my student loan. So, I mean, it's not like I had a bunch of stuff going on in my life. So people would just say, Kathryn, come along. They didn't say, hey, what are you doing? Because they knew I wasn't doing anything. So um, my first real, other than setting up chairs in the meeting was my sponsor said, meet me at 5 o'clock at the NA office because we had a little office here. And we had at that time a meeting list that you had to cut out and then staple in the middle and fold together, and it would slide. It was the perfect size to slide in the back of a cigarette package. That's how we designed it. And so, but it had to be cut and stapled and folded. And so I did that. That was my
Okay.
first formal introduction to service. And all I knew was it was just fun to talk to other members and drink coffee and hang out. And I didn't think about it till much later that I was doing service. Nowadays people have, people will go, we need you to do service, or we need help with this. And I'm just like, that's not how I grew up in NA. People would just say, Kathryn, meet me at 5, or, we're going and we're doing some public information, or you have 6 months now, it's time to get cleared to go into an institution. I mean, people didn't make an announcement at a meeting and beg for help. I think that that's probably the wrong approach. Personally, I think my sponsor got me involved. That's just what we did.
Right. And we've been having that conversation lately about making announcements during meetings and making service, which we know is a gift, seem like a chore. And it's like, oh, we're just dying for people to get
Right.
involved. And it's like, who would want to get involved in that if we're making it sound like that all the time?
Absolutely. I used to say to some people, like, you sound like it's a sinking ship, right? So
Right.
why, or the way we talk about area, I mean, like a circus and stuff, why would people go? We have to share the gifts a lot more. And so that becomes an attraction to people. And if people understood the whole essence of service, I mean, because I started in AA, I said to people, like, if you study the history, AA had the concept of service before they had the steps, and people stayed sober. That's a really, really, really important thing to know, that service is not an option. Service is an essential part of how I get clean and stay clean. They were going around carrying the message verbally before they even had the structure of the steps. I think that has sort of been lost as the years have gone on.
My next question is, can you tell me about some of your most memorable service experiences?
First of all, the most memorable ones are that I stayed clean after, because one of the things I've had to let go of is any kind of expectations or sort of, this pressure of what's going to happen when I do service, because I believe that I'm an instrument of my higher power. So I stay clean. I mean, that's always the highlight. But when I think back about it, though, when you find out how your higher power used you in just amazing ways with other people, that always gives me goosebumps, right? And so I think of, in the beginning, we started a bunch of public information here in Edmonton. I was also one of the regional PI chairs out here at Alsace. So those initial efforts to go into classes and talk to social workers and doctors and nurses. I mean, even if you convince one person that Narcotics Anonymous is an option, I mean, you're going to save thousands of addicts' lives. So, I mean, sometimes I really get emotional. I think about that, like just throwing a rock in the lake and seeing the ripples. Right? We will never know how much good we did by doing those initial things. And but I do think that I started to do all these speaking engagements at at the university to the doctors, and then we were doing speaking engagements for PI out in high schools, and so what the good part about that, you're going to talk about gifts here, was I got my voice back, right? I got some confidence, and I got like, I have a message to carry. My pain and my suffering has value. I can share that with others. But then people started to ask Kathryn to share, and not Narcotics Anonymous. And so there was also some really powerful lessons about, watching when we get put in elements of prestige or position or the ego inflating experiences. So my sponsor said, okay, wait a minute, the schools are asking for you. That means you have to say no, and you have to get somebody else to go. And so I was mad about that. And then she made me wash dishes at my home group for a month.
Nice.
And and after a month, she said, why are you washing dishes? And I honestly didn't know. I said, I'm washing dishes for all of you guys, and I have a resentment. And she said, okay, wash dishes for another month, because I just didn't get it. I didn't get that service wasn't, like this codependent pattern of running around and serving you, that I was doing service for a higher power, that I was, trying to move from being a taker to a giver, that, the book talks about a profound change of character. Something was happening and transforming inside of me. That's the most amazing thing about service is here's this self-centered addict, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about other people. I mean, that's part of the spiritual awakening that the steps bring on. So, and that because she was trying to teach me humility, that there's no, the highest you can get in Narcotics Anonymous is clean. There's no, if you can't wash dishes and be happy, Kathryn, it's your home group, then you can't speak at the World Convention, and you can't do service in other areas. And I've always believed that, because each one of those acts is an act of humility and of love. Like it says, service is a posture in the heart, right? In our new literature. I love that. It's not a position. So part of it is just, how do I give back to my home group? And how do I show up? I mean, probably one of the funniest ones is I was at a career fair. I don't know why we got invited to a career fair, like Narcotics Anonymous, for all those addicts who want to grow up to be addicts, or I don't know, clean or what. It just felt weird to be at a career fair. But there was this young kid, because nobody wanted to come up and talk to us because their teachers were there, their parents, the cops were there. I mean, it was just a weird venue. But this one kid kind of, slid a meeting list off the table, and we kind of found him sort of off to the side. And he said, you mean you guys are addicts and you don't use anymore? And he broke down crying, because he had no idea that he didn't have to be alone with this, and that there was a way out. And it's those moments, I mean, especially here in Edmonton, and Canada, we've been really blessed. I remember talking to people at the World Office, and they said, so you guys can reach people that have never heard about Narcotics Anonymous, like ever? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, wow, that's wild. Because, in larger places like California, they were doing different kind of work. But I think about him, and I think about sort of a lot of those people that we met way back then. The other one I think is probably most of the time we don't know the result of our service work, right? But I have to say, there was a guy who was really wanting to use, and he was trying to move back to Ontario, and his sponsor in Vancouver gave him a stack of CDs, and he drove across the country. And it was years later that he phoned me, and he said he was going to get to Ontario and use, but it was my CD that he got at some kind of convention that convinced him to go to a meeting. Oh, I'm going to cry.
Wow.
And so it's those moments that you have no idea. You do just generously do what we do, which is share your experience, strength, and hope. And then God does some cool stuff with that. And I mean, what do you say when somebody comes up and tells you that yeah, it made a big difference. And especially to me, because I heard the message on 2 cassette tapes. And I know what it's like when we kind of downplay that sometimes. Now they're on MP3s and YouTube and whatever, but it has a profound impact on people's lives to hear the spoken word and know they're not alone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got goosebumps. Thanks for sharing that. I want to ask you about sponsorship. So
Right.
what's your personal sort of sponsorship style? Like, do you have one of these big elaborate sponsorship families, or like how do you sponsor your sponsees? Like, can you just tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Oh, that's a good question. I mean, for years, Edmonton's kind of small. So, I mean, when, we've grown, but certainly what happened was a lot of the women, for various reasons, kind of in the first and second generation of NA here, kind of moved on to different things. And then a friend of mine and I kind of committed that we would stay in Narcotics Anonymous. I mean, I don't know where else I would go. I mean, NA works very well as a way of life, and not only to keep me clean, but I don't know, it keeps me, that's why we say clean and serene, right? It keeps me well balanced. But anyway, we decided that for sure we were going to stick and stay, because we didn't want any women in Edmonton to ever know what it feels like to not have any women with more clean time than you. It's a really awful, lonely feeling. And so, I mean, there was a handful of us out here, but there certainly was a lack of a lot of women with clean time. So that made a big difference. In fact, I went 7 years without a sponsor. I always tell people, don't do that. That was incredibly painful. When you have a sponsor in early recovery, and then, I got kind of started to get complacent and suffer from inoitis, which is really painful. It's really lucky I didn't use over that. So when I had, quite a bit of time, I did link in with I asked a lady that I said probably would say no because she's busier than I am, but she said yes, and so now I'm part of quite an extensive sponsorship family. But I wasn't for most of my recovery, so I think I treasure that. Just because my policy is that you have a sponsor, and that's one person, but you need to have 4, 5, 6 other people, and a lot of them are my sponsee sisters. But you got to have more people, because you're not always going to reach your sponsor. And so that's the advantage of having a sponsorship family. Here in Edmonton, we've been so busy with and we can't see each other as much with COVID. So I started kind of a Marco Polo group for my sponsees and their sponsees, and there's 50 of us now, which is kind of wild.
Nice.
And so people share on the Just for Today reading or a spiritual principle almost every day. And through COVID, that's been really awesome. I mean, so when people are less than 5 years, I think sponsors should be fairly directive, because people don't know what halts is, or what the spiritual principle is with every step, and so they need a lot more direction and help. But I sponsor a lot of women with clean time, and then it's kind of like a co-journeying kind of thing. I put a lot of responsibility on them to ask me questions, to tell me what is it that I have to offer, what is it that you want, and what are you willing to do to get that. And also having a discussion about being current, probably because of my own experiences. I made a mistake, and I started to just do what we call check-in sponsorship, right? So it's kind of this is kind of what's happening in my life, but that's kind of what you would do with a friend, right?
Right.
And so I usually try to avoid that now I try not to co-sign things, or I say to people, for a couple reasons, I want people to be current in their, this is what I'm going through right now, so that I can actually help and offer my experience, strength, and hope. But also because, and this is really important, Brian, I've had to practice being current with my sponsors so that I can practice accepting love and support when I'm going through something, because I'm not good at that. I'm used to saying, oh my God, you won't believe how hard this was, and this is what I did. But there I am going through something alone again. And Narcotics Anonymous is about never being alone. And so even if my sponsor doesn't have experience, strength, and hope on something, she loves and supports me while I go through something. That's huge. I think, there's that saying about kids. They say every kid should have somebody who's just crazy about you. And I think that's the definition of sponsorship.
Wow.
We
Yeah.
need to have somebody who sees us and hears us and loves us, even if we make stupid decisions and we're back into old patterns. I have this sense of safety with my sponsor that can come and be real with her. And really, I don't have to have any secrets that way. And secrets keep us sick, right? So I think that's the biggest gift that I try to give my sponsees. I see them, I hear them, I'm with them no matter what's going on. And then we start talking about what kind of spiritual principles and steps and traditions. But because we're talking about service, I really think it's important. I sponsor people into the literature first. They have to start reading the literature. And then we start sponsoring people into the step work. And then after steps comes traditions. And then we get into service. I mean, it's not anybody that I sponsor is doing service. They can choose what kind of service, but they're doing service. I mean, and I don't, that's a non-negotiable for me. So sometimes I think in NA, we don't really have a service problem. We have a sponsorship problem, because I don't know why it seems like an easy requirement for me. And it's because of what I said earlier. I see service, serve us, not serve me, as part of the essential change of character that's necessary that we talk about in step 12. And if people want what I have, that's a big part of how I got it and keep it.
Do you have anything that you want to share in regards to service that you think is really important for anyone listening to hear?
Oh, let's see what I haven't already said. I really think that part of the spiritual awakening of step 12 is really important, because for a long time I did a service-based recovery, and so I kind of, and I don't know why we do this over time. I stopped going to my home group and as often, and I stopped working the steps because I was so involved with the service structure. And then I started to realize that I was becoming insane again. I mean, the relapse and recovery talks about how we can go back to some of our sickest behaviors without even picking up a drug. And that was a good definition of some of my behavior in the service structure. And so just learning that I had to bring the spiritual principles that I was incorporating in my steps into my service, that there, and being this instrument of my higher power was really, really an important piece of that. Now, I misunderstood that early in recovery and thought that being an instrument of my higher power means doing service until it hurts. And I don't think that's the intention of a loving God either. So I had to really learn about, and in our new literature, it stood out for me because it said, and if you had an instrument, you wouldn't play it out of tune. You would tune that instrument. And so what I want to say to people is we're supposed to be happy givers. There's a lot of times when I did service and I was miserable and I was resentful. And, I think then, for me, I have to switch out my service then, or mix it up, or learn how to set boundaries. But I had to really learn to incorporate my giving with self-care. And I think that has to do everything with step 10 and hungry, angry, lonely, tired, too serious. That those things distort my perception of myself, the world, everybody in it. It's really hard to be a happy giver when your instrument isn't in tune. And so it's that balance, right? And I don't think it's an easy thing to get to, but I encourage all my sponsees to balance out their service with self-care. The other thing is, I just want to, because a lot of people say, Kathryn, I can't believe you're a parent and you're doing all these things and you're working, and, and service within our home is really important. Like if I'm practicing spiritual principles with you guys, but I'm, grumpy and miserable at home, then there's something off in my program. So absolutely doing service in my community and with my family is important. However, the catch there is that, trust me, anybody can coach my son's soccer team. You have to take this little course. It doesn't take long. And so doing that kind of service in my community, really anybody could replace me. But in Narcotics Anonymous, we've been given the key. I'm going to cry again. The key to open up other people's prison door. And that's a responsibility. So doing service within Narcotics Anonymous is just a profound, it's a gift and it's a responsibility. And I feel like as a woman in particular, it's really important. Women often, I don't know if you know this, Brian, but women often get a little bit of clean time and then they start letting that critical part of their head tell them they have nothing to offer. They don't want to share. In fact, I've been telling people I don't want to share anywhere in Western Canada anymore because we need to get more women out there. But women need kind of a nudge that you have your message is important. Your experience, strength, and hope is valuable. We need you and we need your voice out there. Yeah, I don't know. Those are the two top things off the top of my head that I try to share as often as I can, that, take care of yourself, and also women's voices. Don't shy away. We need you.
Thank you, Kathryn. I really appreciate you sharing with me, with us. I got a lot out of that. So thank you. And thank you for everything you do for Narcotics Anonymous.
Well, and thank you, Brian, for your service. And for everyone who's listening here, I always tell people, don't go home and say, oh, that speaker had a good message, I really liked her. Go home and say, wow, look what the Narcotics Anonymous program, and in this case, service, did for her. And maybe if I could go to my home group and give back, maybe I can get those kinds of benefits too, because this is about, you transforming your program, not just listening to how it transformed my life. So right. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So go enjoy your home group, talk to that newcomer. What is it? We should start that more in Canada, but it says in the new literature that, some people end the meeting with go help someone.
Go help someone. Yeah.
And I've been trying to get that to catch on here. In Edmonton, it's not really working well.
No.
But I think, isn't that interesting? That's a core piece of, it's not just in step 12. We don't have to wait that long. We can give back even if we're 5 minutes clean, but go help someone. So thanks, Brian, for bringing up this topic and chatting today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kathy.